Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us. We've been getting a lot of questions lately about how to better understand covert contracts and also how societal institutions have changed over time. So we thought we'd really take a deep dive into these concepts and see what we can uncover. We're going to be pulling a lot of insights today from Transform Your Life, a blueprint for the modern man. It's a really fascinating guide for men who are trying to figure out how to navigate, a world where traditional masculinity is often challenged and questioned.
Yeah, it's really interesting how this book kind of tackles things like the impact of, all the changes we've been seeing in gender roles and how that's really impacting men's lives. And it also offers some really practical strategies for developing confidence and assertiveness, which I think is something a lot of people are looking for these days.
Absolutely. And we're also going to be looking at the importance of things like discipline and structure, especially in relationships and parenting, which are such important areas in our lives. And we'll also delve into the whole idea of like the beta male mentality and see what that's all about. The book starts off by discussing how women's roles in society have evolved. It points out how women are more present in the workforce and leadership positions, and how this shift has really kind of changed societal norms in a lot of ways. What are your thoughts on all of this, and how do you think it connects to our listeners' desire to understand how societal institutions have shifted over time?
Yeah. Well, one thing that's really interesting is the example the book uses. It talks about Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, and his decision to publicly come out. And it uses that as an example of these kind of changing norms and this growing acceptance, different identities and the importance of being authentic. And this societal shift, I think, is definitely something for all of us to consider, as we reflect on our own experiences and relationships and how things have changed.
For sure. And it kind of ties into this statistic from the Pew Research Center that shows that women now make up over 50% of the U.S. population. That's a pretty significant change from just a few decades ago.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge change. And, it kind of leads us to another concept that the book explores, which is the idea of the red pill. Have you heard of that?
I have, yeah. It's a pretty thought-provoking concept.
Yeah, it's definitely making the rounds in certain circles. And the book describes it as this kind of wake-up call to the realities of modern society, kind of like a moment of realization about how things actually work. And then it introduces the idea of the manosphere, which is this community of men who've kind of embraced this red pill concept. And they're really actively trying to understand and reclaim their masculinity in this kind of evolving landscape that we're all navigating.
Yeah, the book dives into some pretty interesting and sometimes controversial ideas from this community, like the whole concept of ship tests, which it describes as ways that some people argue women test men's confidence and boundaries, but it's really careful to emphasize the importance of approaching these ideas with a critical eye. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, I think that's a really crucial point. It's great to explore different perspectives, and the manosphere definitely offers some valuable insights. But I think it's important to not just blindly accept any ideology. We have to be critical thinkers and really try to develop our own understanding of these complex dynamics that are at play.
Totally agreed. And this is where the book's emphasis on discipline and structure comes in. It argues that these qualities are essential for success in today's world, whether it's in relationships or parenting or even just your daily routine.
Yeah, and it actually shares this really compelling story about a couple, Mark and Lisa, who decided to implement a really strict schedule for their kids. And it led to some really positive changes in their family life.
Wow, that's interesting. And, it's not just anecdotal evidence either. There was a study published in the Journal of Abnormal Child Psychology that found a link between structured households and fewer symptoms of anxiety and depression in children. That's something for our listeners to really consider as they think about the role of structure in their own lives. Maybe it's time to take a look at those daily routines, those family schedules, and see if there's room for more structure.
Absolutely. I think that's a great takeaway. And building on that idea of discipline, the book then introduces this concept of the alpha male, the confident, assertive, and successful man who really takes charge and achieves his goals. And it might be helpful for our listeners to explore how they can cultivate this alpha mindset by focusing on things like physical fitness, communication skills, and working on their self-confidence. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think those are all incredibly valuable skills, regardless of your background or goals. It's all about really harnessing your inner strength and using it to create the life you want.
Exactly. It's about empowerment and taking control of your own destiny. And speaking of creating the life you want, the book then kind of dives into the world of modern dating. And it presents what it calls a red-pilled approach to attracting women, which focuses on self-improvement and really understanding those shit tests that we talked about earlier. It even suggests using humor and this interesting concept called amused mastery to kind of navigate these tests.
Okay, amused mastery. That sounds intriguing. Can you elaborate on that a bit more? What does that look like in practice, and how might that be helpful for our listeners as they navigate their own relationship?
Yeah, so amused mastery, it's kind of about like staying calm and collected, even when you're like facing a challenge or you know somebody's trying to test you. Like imagine responding to a difficult situation with a calm demeanor and maybe even a little bit of humor. Like you have this playful indifference.
So it's kind of like you're not letting those little things get to you. You're almost rising above it.
Exactly. You don't take the bait and react emotionally. The book actually uses this analogy of Batman. He's always cool and collected even when he's facing down these crazy villains. And that's kind of what amused mastery is all about. It shows confidence and self-control, which are qualities that a lot of people find attractive.
I love that analogy. It really drives the point home. It's about having that unshakable inner strength. And, beyond just navigating these tests, the book also talks a lot about the importance of communication, especially in relationships. It goes into things like active listening, reading body language, and setting those clear boundaries. Those are skills that can benefit anyone, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Those are fundamentals for healthy relationships. And one thing the book emphasizes is using I statements when you're expressing your needs and feelings. So instead of saying you always do this, it's more about saying I feel this way when.
Right. It's about owning your emotions and expressing them clearly and respectfully without placing blame on the other person. It seems like this could really help our listeners avoid those covert contracts we were talking about earlier.
Definitely it can help create a more open and honest dynamic in the relationship. Now let's maybe delve a little deeper into the book's advice on actually developing those alpha qualities. Remember, it defines an alpha male as that confident and successful man who really takes charge. And it argues that these qualities aren't just about dating. They can help you succeed in all areas of life.
It's about reaching your full potential and shaping the life you want. So how does the book suggest actually cultivating these alpha qualities?
Well, it takes a multifaceted approach focusing on your physical, mental, and emotional development. It really emphasizes physical fitness, particularly weightlifting.
So there's more to it than just hitting the gym.
Right. It's not just about appearances. It's about pushing your limits, developing mental toughness and discipline. And that sense of accomplishment can then kind of spill over into other areas of your life.
So it's about building that inner strength that empowers you to face challenges head on.
Exactly. And it's not all about physical strength either. The book also highlights mental and emotional development. It encourages men to embrace what it calls emotional stoicism.
Okay. Emotional stoicism. That might sound a bit intense. Can you break that down for us a little bit?
Sure, it's essentially about learning to control your emotions rather than letting them control you. Imagine developing that inner peace and resilience that allows you to handle challenges with grace and composure.
So it's not about suppressing your emotions, but more about managing them effectively.
Precisely, the book argues that this emotional mastery is crucial for navigating the ups and downs of life, especially relationships. It's about remaining grounded and focused even when things get tough.
It's like having that unshakable core strength that allows you to weather any storm. And in addition to emotional stoicism, the book also emphasizes the importance of setting clear boundaries. Why are boundaries so crucial? And how can our listeners benefit from establishing those in their own lives?
Well, boundaries are essential for protecting your time, energy, and emotional well-being. They're about knowing your limits and communicating them clearly and assertively.
So it's about being upfront about what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not. What advice does the book give for actually setting these boundaries?
It encourages men to be honest about their needs and expectations in relationship, to not be afraid to say no when something doesn't feel right, and even to walk away from situations that aren't serving them.
That takes courage, but it also shows self-respect. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less.
Exactly. And the book ties this ability to set and enforce boundaries back to that alpha male archetype.
It's about taking control of your life and shaping your own destiny.
Now, alongside these kind of more external aspects, the book also emphasizes personal growth and self-improvement. It encourages a mindset of continuous learning and improvement across all areas of life.
So it's about having that growth mindset, always looking for ways to learn, evolve, and become the best version of yourself.
Exactly, and remember, self-improvement is an ongoing journey, not a destination. There's always room to grow, regardless of where you are in life. The book suggests setting clear goals, establishing healthy habits, and even seeking out mentors for guidance and support.
It's about taking a proactive approach to personal growth,
Yeah.
utilizing all the resources available to you.
Right, and this kind of ties back to the book's discussion of the beta male mentality, which we touched on earlier.
Yes, remind us what that mentality entails and why the book sees it as something to overcome.
Well, the book describes a beta male as someone who lacks confidence, assertiveness, and drive. They might be passive, indecisive, and fearful of taking risks, often settling for less than they deserve. And the book really encourages men to reject the mentality and embrace their full potential.
It's about breaking free from those limiting beliefs and stepping into a life of confidence and purpose.
Exactly. And the book argues that all of these elements, the physical fitness, the emotional stoicism, the clear boundaries, and the personal growth, they all contribute to dismantling that beta male.
It's about taking control of your life, both internally and externally, and creating a life that aligns with your values and aspirations. But we can't forget about those potential pitfalls that the book highlights, particularly the danger of neglecting personal growth in favor of relationships.
That's a really crucial point. The book argues that true fulfillment comes from within, from pursuing your own passions and developing a strong sense of self-worth. It cautions against relying too heavily on others for validation or happiness.
So it's not about becoming completely self-reliant, but about finding a balance between personal growth and nurturing your relationship.
Exactly. It's about creating a life that is rich and fulfilling both independently and within the context of your relationships.
This kind of brings to mind the book's discussion of discipline and structure. It seems to apply not only to daily routines, but also to relationships and personal growth.
Absolutely. The book advocates for a structured approach to life in general. It emphasizes setting a clear vision for your life, creating a plan to achieve your goals, and sticking to a daily routine that supports your aspirations.
It's about creating a framework that empowers you to make progress towards your goals and live a life that is intentional and fulfilling.
Now, before we wrap up this section, I want to touch upon one last piece of advice that really resonated with me. The book encourages men to record and analyze their conversations.
That's interesting. What's the purpose behind that?
It's all about self-awareness. By recording and analyzing your conversations, you can identify patterns in your communication style, pinpoint areas where you could improve your social skills, and ultimately become a more effective communicator.
So it's like taking a deep dive into your own communication pattern
Yeah,
and using those insights to create more meaningful and fulfilling interactions.
exactly. It's about taking a proactive approach to personal growth and using every tool at your disposal to become the best version of yourself.
And that's something we can all strive for, regardless of where we are in our journey. Before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, let's take a moment to reflect on everything we've discussed so far. We've covered a lot of ground. From understanding those shit tests to embracing emotional stoicism, cultivating alpha qualities, and even analyzing our own conversations for self-improvement. What stands out to you as particularly relevant for our listeners?
I think the overarching theme of personal responsibility is really crucial. The book emphasizes that we have the power to shape our own destinies, to create the lives we want, and to become the men we aspire to be. It's about taking ownership of our choices and actions, and recognizing that we have the ability to transform our lives.
It's a powerful message. It's about stepping into our power and realizing that we're not victims of circumstance, but rather creators of our own reality.
Exactly. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore the book's insights on avoiding common pitfalls in relationships, creating a life that is truly extraordinary, and delving deeper into those covert contracts and how they can sabotage our happiness.
Stay tuned, because we're about to unpack even more valuable insights that can help you transform your life. All right, so we're back and ready to dive into the last part of our deep dive on Transform Your Life. One thing that really stood out to me was how the book really emphasizes the importance of self-preservation. And understanding those covert contracts that can sometimes sneak into relationships.
Yeah, those covert contracts can be real sneaky. They're like those unspoken expectations and assumptions we bring into relationships without even realizing it. And they can cause a lot of trouble down the line.
It's like we're operating on these hidden assumptions about what our partner should be doing, but we never actually talk about it.
Exactly. And the book suggests that a lot of these covert contracts come from, those traditional gender roles and societal expectations. And it can create this imbalance where one person feels obligated to fulfill certain roles while the other just kind of takes it for granted.
Yeah, so it's not just about being aware of these covert contracts in our own relationships, but also understanding the bigger picture, the societal context.
Right, like how those expectations might be influencing us without us even realizing it. The book actually uses this interesting analogy of a business contract. It says if the terms and conditions aren't clearly defined, or if one person doesn't uphold their end of the agreement, well, the whole thing falls apart. And it's the same with relationships.
That makes a lot of sense. So how can our listeners avoid falling into this trap of covert contracts and create relationships that are more balanced and fulfilling?
Well, the book really stresses the importance of open and honest communication. You have to talk to your partner about your needs, your expectations, and your boundaries. Be upfront and transparent about what you want and what you're willing to give.
So having those tough conversations is key, even if they're uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also important to remember that people change and grow over time. So what might have worked at the beginning of a relationship might need to be renegotiated later on.
It's all about being adaptable and adjusting those expectations as you go. Now, the book also goes into the whole idea of power and control in relationships, which can be a pretty sensitive topic.
Yeah, it's definitely complex, but the book argues that many relationships have this unspoken power dynamic, often rooted in those traditional gender roles and societal norms. And it can lead to one person feeling dominant or controlling, while the other feels submissive or powerless.
Yeah, that kind of imbalance can really damage a relationship.
Absolutely. The book emphasizes that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and equality. It encourages men to be aware of those power dynamics and to work towards creating relationships that are balanced and equitable.
So it's not about one person calling all the shots. It's about having a true partnership where both people feel empowered and respected.
Exactly. And the book offers some strategies for shifting those power dynamics. Things like communicating assertively, setting boundaries, and recognizing your own worth and value.
Right, it's about understanding that you deserve to be in a relationship where you feel safe, respected, and valued.
Now let's talk about fatherhood. The book highlights how important fathers are in shaping their children's development, especially in today's world.
It's definitely a big responsibility. What insights does the book offer for fathers or those who are thinking about becoming fathers?
Well, it emphasizes the importance of being present and involved, offering both emotional support and guidance. It's about being a positive role model and a source of strength and inspiration for your kids.
So it's not just about being the breadwinner or the disciplinarian. It's about creating that loving and supportive environment where kids feel safe to explore and grow.
Exactly. And the book also talks about the importance of discipline and structure. It argues that clear boundaries, expectations, and consequences help kids thrive. They learn self-discipline and responsibility.
It's about giving them the tools they need to navigate the world.
Right, and the book gives some practical tips for setting those boundaries, establishing routines, and teaching those valuable life skills. It also encourages fathers to instill a sense of self-respect, assertiveness, and a commitment to personal growth in their sons.
So it's about raising a generation of confident and capable young men who are ready to face the challenges ahead.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up, I want to highlight one last message from the book: the importance of embracing your masculinity in a positive and healthy way.
Yeah, masculinity is a word that can have a lot of different meanings. How does the book define it?
Well, it emphasizes that true masculinity isn't about aggression, dominance, or suppressing your emotion. It's about embracing your strength, your courage, your drive, and your protectiveness.
It's about using those qualities to be a leader, a provider, a protector.
Exactly. And the book encourages men to reclaim those positive aspects of masculinity. You know, the ones that have maybe been lost or distorted in recent times. It's about being comfortable with who you are and embracing those qualities that make you a man.
It's about harnessing those qualities to create a life that's truly meaningful and fulfilling.
Well, that brings us to the end of our exploration of Transform Your Life, a blueprint for the modern man. This book really challenges conventional thinking, encourages self-reflection, and gives some practical tools for creating a life that's both successful and fulfilling.
It's a call to action for men to embrace their full potential and create a world where they can truly thrive.
If you're ready to embark on that journey of transformation, we highly recommend checking out Transform Your Life, a blueprint for the modern man. You can find it on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
That's right. And until next time, keep diving deep, keep learning, and keep growing. And remember, the power to transform your life lies within you.
We'll see you on our next deep dive.